Well, I first heard of the nudge unit of the British government during COVID times, where the government was trying psychological tactics to nudge Brits to make certain decisions in their lives. It was different than an ad. I've always found it odd when governments take out ads, especially for monopoly services about which you have no choice. But this was different than an ad. This was using certain ways of phrasing from a psychological, almost a scientific way to get people to do what the government wanted, even if it was against their individual interests. Now, I don't know if it worked. I don't know how many people do what the government says, but I think it's got to be a certain number. Otherwise, the nudge unit wouldn't be nudged. Well, imagine my surprise when I learned that here in Canada, we have our own government nudge unit too. And the story is covered in a Justice Centre report published by the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms that reveals the existence of something I had never heard about. Apparently, there's something in Ottawa called the Impact and Innovation Unit, and they follow behavioral psychology such as nudge theory. Joining us now via Zoom from Calgary is the president of the Justice Centre, the organization that has published Manufacturing Consent, Government Behavioural Engineering of Canadians, written by veteran journalist Nigel Hannaford. John, great to see you again. You're the boss of the Justice Centre. This isn't a lawsuit you're filing, which is what we normally talk to you about. This is a revelation. This is exposing a manipulative psychological weapon that has been aimed at Canadians. Am I right?
Yep. The government created its message already that the vaccine is safe and effective, so get vaccinated. That was designed and developed before the testing had even been completed. And so it was very much in a vacuum of knowledge. There was no conclusive evidence that the vaccines were safe or effective. But this message was put out by the Impact and Innovation Unit, which is in Ottawa, part of the Privy Council office, which sits at the apex of the federal bureaucracy. And it's an organization with a large budget. In the report on their own website, it says, since 2017, the Impact and Innovation Unit has experienced rapid growth with 28 active or completed outcomes-based funding projects worth over $725 million, spanning economic, environmental, and social policy. So these are behavioral scientists that are not merely just providing information about government programs, but they are pushing Canadians to behave in certain ways, like feeling enthusiastic about rolling up your sleeve to get injected with a substance for which no long-term safety data was in existence.
You know, I think the word brainwashing is what comes to mind. Propaganda, certainly. Here, let me read one sentence from your press release today. IIU, again, that's this Impact and Innovation Unit. Techniques include emotional framing using fear, reassurance, or urgency to influence compliance with policies such as lockdowns, mask mandates, and vaccine requirements. What are some of the others? You say this has been going on since 2017, so it predates the COVID mania. What other issues? I presume global warming, teaching us to be afraid of global warming is probably the number one. What else would be in there? Accepting mass immigration, accepting crime on our streets. Like, I'm trying to think of the kind of prestidigitation that the government would hire these psychological manipulators for.
Well, definitely the thesis that mankind controls the world's climate, which is very much subject to debate, but you can expect the Impact and Innovation Unit to swing into, if the government were to impose the 15-minute prison districts or 15-minute cities other things where they want us to change our behavior, and they want us to accept the violations of our human rights, our fundamental freedoms of expression, association, religion, conscience, travel, mobility, so on and so forth. If they want us to accept and obey and comply with all the measures that violate our charter rights and freedoms, you can see this coming on the climate front for sure. In fact, some of the documents that I have seen that are publicly posted online, they talk about climate change, and they've got the thesis that mankind controls the climate. And so don't be surprised when we get millions of our tax dollars spent on nudging us to obey whatever the government has in mind for us in the name of saving us from the climate holocaust that of course we should all be very afraid of.
Yeah. I just can't believe that this sum of money here. And again, this isn't polling. This isn't regular advertising or sponsorships. This is psychological nudging, which I think by nature has to be somewhat deceptive. If people knew that the government was being overt about manipulating us, we'd be resistant to it. I mean, that's why advertisements in a newspaper are marked ads, so they don't trick anyone. So people know, oh, they're trying to persuade me, I can have my guard up. As opposed to if you read an editorial, you think, okay, this is genuinely the view held by the newspaper. There's a reason why ethical news companies have tell me or sell me, and it's clear which one you're getting. But it seems to me, and again, this is the first I've heard about this nudge unit, that it only works if it's sort of under the radar, if it tricks you. If someone said, excuse me, this is a message from the government, take your jab. Well, then you would discount it. You say, okay, that's their point of view. But if it came in more subtly, if it came in emotionally, if it came in a hidden way, then it would be a kind of trickery. That's what I imagine it's like. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is not like a poster you might see in a washroom recommending that you should not drink alcohol while you're pregnant. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, and it says who it is, and the message is obvious. But this was about crafting messages to alleviate anxiety when once a vaccine was made available to the public, and initially it was voluntary. Immediately there were reports, 13-year-old boy in Wisconsin died 2 days after a second dose. People all over the world, we had people dying shortly after getting injected with COVID vaccine. And so the government was asking what kind of messaging is most likely to reduce public anxiety about adverse events following vaccination. And so this is manipulative to get people to behave in a certain way as opposed to merely providing objective information. It's also interesting they did not change course once it became quite clear that there were adverse impacts from the vaccine. It was full speed ahead with the same message. It's safe and effective. You need to get vaccinated. That they were not going to be influenced by the reality of what was actually emerging on the ground.
In your report, you have 3 recommendations, and it makes sense because if you participate in a psychological experiment, let's say at a university, if there's a professor who wants to do some test on you, there's all sorts of ethical obligations that surround that. There has to be informed consent. You have to know who, there's a lot of things you need to get someone to sign off on before you can do an experiment on them. And that's even on very beneficial, positive experiments. I think one of my favorite social, psychological experiments of all time is called the Asch conformity test or the Milgram experiment. These are actually somewhat troubling that they get people to test their conformity and their obedience. Stuff like that you have to tell people that you're part of a test. You have to disclose things to them. Otherwise, it's a form of abuse. And we got some of these rules, frankly, after the Holocaust, after the Nazi doctors' trials in Nuremberg, where you cannot run experiments on people without their consent. So let me read to you the 3 recommendations from your report, and then maybe you can expand on these. Number 1, parliamentary oversight of all behavioral science uses within federal departments, ensuring elected representatives retain oversight of national policy. 2, public disclosure of all behavioral research conducted with taxpayer funds, creating transparency of government influence on Canadians' beliefs and decisions. And finally, independent ethical review of any behavioral interventions affecting public opinion or individual autonomy, ensuring accountability and informed consent. That's that informed consent we were just talking about. So I take it none of these things are there now.
No, the sunlight is the best disinfectant. I mean, if you get transparency, typically in many situations, that's going to immediately get rid of half of the problems or more than half of the problems if you just have transparency. So if our tax dollars are going to be spent on behavioral science and nudging us to comply with violations of our charter rights and freedoms, that needs to be fully disclosed, publicly disclosed. I mean, it's a great start already that this report is based on publicly available information that you could find on the internet. So there is, a partial disclosure already, but it needs to go further, and there needs to be parliamentary oversight. This is the Privy Council office. It's at the apex of the federal bureaucracy, but that bureaucracy is, or should be, accountable to Canadian citizens and taxpayers.
Let me ask you one last question, because privacy historically has been something that the left, at least sometimes, claims to care about. And I think right now of the United Kingdom, where there's something called Big Brother Watch, and that's actually a left-wing group run by a left-wing leader, and I admire what they do, by the way. Here in Canada, there's a few accountability groups sort of on the left. I think I put Democracy Watch in that category. I'm not sure how effective they are. Do you have any allies in this? Like, for example, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Is there anyone on the left, even the Green Party or the NDP or the Bloc, who cares about privacy, or are they all in with the surveillance state and the nudge state?
Fortunately, and I can't say too much about the Canadian Civil Liberties Association on some of their issues. I mean, they were terrible on embracing the government narrative during lockdowns and vaccine mandates. To their credit, they were ferocious, outspoken opponents against Bill C-2, and there's lots of individuals, law professors, organizations, Canadian Civil Liberties Association, that were very critical of Bill C-2, which is the Strong Borders Act, but which should be called the Strong Surveillance Act, so much so that the federal government has now put Bill C-2 on the back burner. And so some of the worst provisions of it, like giving Canada Post the right to open letter mail without a warrant, creating this brand new Authorized Access to Information Act, which would give federal government officials, not just police, but many government officials would have access to warrantless searches of computers and cell phones. There was such a big outcry against Bill C-2 across the spectrum, including groups that you might call left-wing groups, that the government has actually put Bill C-2 on the back burner, and they've taken out the core provisions about immigration, refugees, and borders, put that into a separate bill, Bill C-12, which they're going to fast track, and they may well get support from the Conservatives on it. And the really bad parts of Bill C-2 about increasing the surveillance state have been put on the back burner, and that's because we've had it across the political spectrum. There's been opposition to the surveillance state, and I'm truly grateful for that. I would hate it, if the Conservatives and Libertarians are the only ones against the surveillance state, would be a sad state of affairs. But I think on this issue, it is across the board that we have support for the free society on this issue.
I'm glad to hear it. You know, we have to dig a little deeper into those issues myself. I have not yet read C-12, so I'll have to brief myself on it. Perhaps it's the kind of thing that Rebel News should be doing a campaign about. I'm going to take a look at it. Thank you for flagging it. Well, listen, great work, and we know the author, Nigel Hannaford, who did it, so I look forward to tucking into it. I think it's important that we reveal how our government manipulates us. This is different than a regular poll or a regular campaign ad. This, I think, is a psychological manipulation, and frankly, it might actually be legally unethical for psychologists to do. We'll have to find out. John, keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me on your show.
All right, there you have it. John Carpay, he's the boss over at the Justice Center. The essay, the study, is called Manufacturing Consent, Government Behavioral Engineering of Canadians. The author is Nigel Hannaford. Stay with us. Your letters to me next.